The vampire king insulted a waitress until she said 3 words that froze the entire restaurant. "Do you feel that?" Helena whispered, clutching a tray of empty champagne flutes so hard the glass threatened to snap. The air just got heavier. Lorelei Crestmore didn't look up from the silverware she was polishing, though her own heart skipped a beat. "It's just the storm, Helena. Valerian rain makes everything heavy." "No," Helena hissed, her eyes darting to the heavy oak doors where the rain lashed against the triple-paned glass. "It's him. The music died, Lorelei. Look." Lorelei paused. The jazz band in the corner had indeed faltered, the saxophonist lowering his instrument with trembling hands. The scent of beeswax and expensive Bordeaux suddenly soured with the metallic tang of adrenaline. "They say the king is hungry tonight," Helena murmured, backing away into the shadows of the kitchen service door. "And he isn't looking at the menu." Lorelei tightened her apron strings, her knuckles white. "Then let's hope he doesn't look at us." The double doors of the Midnight Orchid swung open, not by force, but as if the wood itself was retreating in reverence. Silence swept through the dining room like a cold draught. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Wine glasses were lowered with trembling fingers. Even the live jazz band, a trio of seasoned mortals who had seen everything, faltered into a discordant silence before frantically finding a softer, more mournful rhythm. Aldrich Whedon walked in. He didn't walk so much as glide, a creature composed of sharp angles and devastating elegance. His coat was black wool, darker than the shadows clinging to the corners of the room. His skin was the pale of marble left out in the winter moonlight, and his eyes, God, those eyes, were shards of sapphire ice, bored and cruel. Flanking him were his lieutenants. To his left, Garrick Westfall, a brute of a man in a pinstripe suit, his knuckles scarred from centuries of violence. To his right, Vanessa Whitford, beautiful and lethal, her red lips curved in a permanent sneer of superiority. "Reginald!" Aldrich's voice was a low thrum, like a cello bowed by a ghost. "My usual table, and remove the clutter." He gestured vaguely at a couple seated near the window, a senator and his mistress. They scrambled up, abandoning their half-eaten lobster, terrified to offend the vampire king of the Eastern Coven. Lorelei stood by the service station, clutching a silver tray to her chest. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Just breathe," she told herself. "You are invisible. You are furniture." "Lorelei," Reginald, the maitre d', whispered, his face ashen. "Take table 1. Helena is shaking too much to hold a decanter." Lorelei swallowed the lump in her throat. "Yes, sir." She moved toward the table, her steps light. Aldrich had already seated himself, sprawling with the arrogance of a man who owned time itself. Garrick and Vanessa sat opposite him. Lorelei placed the crystal glasses down. Her hand didn't shake, a feat of sheer willpower. She began to pour the vintage, a 1945 Chateau Mouton, when Aldrich raised a hand. "Stop," he commanded. Lorelei froze. "Is something wrong, my lord?" Aldrich turned his gaze on her. Up close, the violence in him was palpable. It radiated off him like heat from a furnace. He looked at her worn shoes, her frayed apron, the stray curl of brown hair falling over her forehead. He didn't see a person. He saw an insect. "This vintage," Aldrich said, his voice carrying across the silent restaurant. "It requires a certain atmosphere to be enjoyed. The scent of poverty is distracting." Vanessa tittered, a sharp, glassy sound. "She does smell of cheap soap and desperation, doesn't she, Aldrich?" Lorelei stiffened. She finished pouring the wine, her jaw set. "I apologize if my presence offends, sir. I'm simply doing my job." Aldrich's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to insects speaking back. He reached out, his movement a blur, and backhanded the glass she had just filled. Crash! The red wine exploded across Lorelei's white apron, soaking through to her skin. It looked like a gunshot wound in the fabric. The glass shattered against the floor, shards skittering under the nearby tables. The entire restaurant gasped. "You are nothing," Aldrich sneered, leaning forward, his voice dripping with venomous boredom. "You are dust, waiting to settle. You exist only because I allow it. Clean this up, on your knees. It fits your station." Garrick chuckled darkly. "Go on, girl. The king gave you an order." Lorelei stood there, the wine cold against her stomach. Humiliation burned her cheeks, hot and fierce. She looked at the spilled wine, then at Aldrich's polished leather shoes. The fear that had been gripping her throat suddenly evaporated, replaced by something ancient, something that felt like it didn't belong to her, yet rose from the marrow of her bones. She didn't kneel. Instead, she dropped the silver tray. It hit the floor with a deafening clang that made Vanessa jump. Aldrich's expression shifted from boredom to genuine menace. He stood up slowly, towering over her. "You defy me. Do you know who I am? I could drain you dry before your heart beats its next rhythm." Lorelei lifted her chin. Her brown eyes, usually soft, hardened into obsidian mirrors. The air around them grew heavy, charged with static electricity. The lights in the restaurant flickered. She looked directly into the Vampire King's eyes, bypassing the predator, looking straight at the soul he thought he had lost centuries ago. "I know exactly who you are, Aldrich," she whispered, her voice resonating with a strange, harmonic power that vibrated the silverware on the tables. Aldrich paused, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "What did you say?" Lorelei stepped closer, invading his personal space. The scent of ozone and old magic suddenly overpowered the smell of wine. She spoke 3 words. Softly, but in the silence of the room, they landed like anvil strikes. "Sabine sends regards." The effect was instantaneous. Aldrich Waden, the scourge of the East, the king of shadows, went rigid. His skin turned a shade of grey that defied logic. The glass in his hand shattered, not from force, but from the sudden, uncontrollable tremor of his grip. Vanessa stood up, hissing, her fangs descending. "How dare you speak that name?" But Aldrich raised a hand, stopping her. He was staring at Lorelei, his eyes wide, the sapphire ice cracking to reveal an abyss of absolute terror and disbelief. "Impossible," he breathed. "She has been dust for 300 years." Lorelei blinked, and the strange power seemed to recede, leaving her disoriented. She looked around, realizing what she had said, but not understanding why. Aldrich didn't give her time to process. He lunged across the table, not to kill, but to capture. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like a steel shackle. "Clear the room," Aldrich roared, his voice shaking the chandeliers. "Everyone out, now!" As Aldrich drags Lorelei toward the exit, the spilled wine on the floor doesn't seep into the carpet. Instead, it bubbles and boils, forming the shape of a sigil, a burning rose, before evaporating into black smoke. The ride in the black limousine was silent and suffocating. Lorelei sat squeezed between Garrick and the door, clutching her wine-stained apron. Aldrich sat opposite her, watching her with the intensity of a scientist examining a new, dangerous isotope. They arrived at the spire, the tallest building in Valerian, a needle of glass piercing the storm clouds. The elevator ride to the penthouse took 40 seconds. 40 seconds of Garrick sniffing the air around her, confused, and Aldrich pacing the small metal box. When the doors opened, Lorelei was shoved into a room that was less a home and more a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was minimal, severe, and priceless. "Sit," Aldrich commanded, pointing to a single velvet chair in the center of the room. Lorelei sat. Her hands were shaking now. The strange surge of power she had felt in the restaurant was gone, leaving her drained and terrified. "Please," she whispered. "I don't know why I said that. I don't even know who Sabine is." Aldrich laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He poured himself a drink, not wine, but a thick, crimson liquid from a crystal decanter. Blood. "Don't lie to me, little mouse," Aldrich said, circling her. "Sabine Everthorne was the only creature on this earth who could bring me to my knees. She was a witch of the old blood, and I killed her 3 centuries ago. I watched her burn." He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "So tell me, how does a 20-year-old waitress with cheap shoes know the name of a dead witch who was erased from history?" "I don't know," Lorelei cried, tears stinging her eyes. It just came out, like someone else was speaking through me." Vanessa entered the room, having trailed them in a separate car. She looked furious. "She is a spy, Aldrich, a hunter's plant. Let me tear her throat out and be done with it." "No," Aldrich said sharply. "If she is a hunter, she would have come with weapons, not a wine opener." "There is something else," Garrick grunted, leaning against a pillar. "She smells wrong, Aldrich. Under the fear and the cheap perfume, she smells like ozone. Like a thunderstorm." Aldrich grabbed Lorelei's chin, forcing her to look at him. He tried to use glamour, the vampire ability to hypnotize and extract truth. His pupils dilated, swallowing the blue iris. "Tell me the truth." His mind pushed against hers. "Who sent you?" Lorelei gasped. She felt his mind invading hers, slippery and cold. But then, inside her head, a wall slammed down, a golden, mental barricade. Aldrich recoiled as if burned, stumbling back. He clutched his head. "What are you?" Lorelei was panting. "I am just a waitress." "No human can block a king's glamour," Vanessa hissed. She drew a silver dagger from her belt. "She is a witch. We have to purge her." "Put the knife away, Vanessa," Aldrich warned. He looked at Lorelei with a new expression. It wasn't fear anymore. It was obsession. "She is the key. Sabine swore a curse before she died. She said her blood would return to judge me." He looked at Lorelei's wine-stained chest. "Strip." Lorelei crossed her arms. "What? No." "I need to see your markings," Aldrich said coldly. "Witches carry the marks of their coven. If you are Sabine's vessel, you will be marked." "I am not taking my clothes off," Lorelei said, her voice trembling but firm. Aldrich moved faster than thought. He didn't strip her, but he grabbed the collar of her uniform and ripped it down the shoulder, exposing her collarbone and the top of her back. Lorelei screamed, trying to cover herself. Aldrich froze. Vanessa gasped. Garrick actually took a step back. On Lorelei's left shoulder, birthmarks formed a constellation. Not random spots, but a perfect geometric pattern of 7 stars. The Pleiades. Augustus Dawnmere's voice came from the shadows of the hallway. The ancient vampire, Aldrich's advisor, stepped into the light, leaning on a cane made of human bone. The 7 sisters, Sabine's crest. Lorelei pulled her torn shirt up. "It's just a birthmark. My mother had it too." "Your mother?" Aldrich asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Where is she?" "She died when I was born," Lorelei said. Aldrich looked at Augustus. "It skipped a generation, or hid for 10. "The bloodline was thought extinguished," Augustus said, his eyes milky and blind, yet seeing everything. "If this girl is of the Everthorne line, Aldrich, you cannot kill her. If her blood spills on these floors in anger, the spire will fall." As they argue, Lorelei looks at her reflection in the dark window. For a split second, the reflection doesn't mimic her fear. The reflection smiles, a cruel, knowing smile that Lorelei is not making, and mouths the words, "Wait for the rain." Lorelei was locked in a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment. The door was heavy oak, reinforced with iron. She paced the room, her mind racing. Sabine, Everthorne, the Seven Sisters. None of it made sense. She was Lorelei. She liked obscure indie bands, over-sugared coffee, and was saving up for culinary school. She wasn't a vessel for a dead witch, but she couldn't deny the feeling in the restaurant, the surge of power, the way the words had tasted on her tongue, metallic and old. Outside the door, she could hear shouting. Aldrich and Vanessa were arguing. "She is a threat!" Vanessa's voice was shrill. "You saw the sigil in the wine? She is awakening." "She doesn't know what she is," Aldrich's voice replied, calmer but tense. "We keep her. We study her." "You mean you want her?" Vanessa spat. "Because she has her eyes." The handle of the door turned. Lorelei grabbed a heavy bronze statue of a horse from the bedside table. Aldrich entered. He had removed his coat. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing pale skin. He looked tired, ancient. He saw the statue in her hand and raised an eyebrow. "Put that down. If I wanted you dead, a piece of bronze wouldn't stop me." Lorelei didn't lower it. "You kidnapped me." "I rescued you," Aldrich corrected, closing the door. "If I had left you in that restaurant, the other covens would have sensed the power flare. You would be dissected by morning. Here, you are under my protection." "Your protection?" Lorelei scoffed. "You're the one who insulted me. You're the one who treats humans like cattle." Aldrich walked to the minibar and poured a glass of water. He offered it to her. Lorelei hesitated, then took it. She was parched. "I treat humans as they are," Aldrich said, leaning against the dresser. "Fragile, ephemeral. But you are a puzzle." "I want to go home," Lorelei said. "You have no home anymore," Aldrich said bluntly. "Your apartment is likely being tossed by Garrick's men as we speak. We need to know who you've been in contact with." "No one. I live alone." Aldrich stepped closer. "Lorelei, think. Have you ever done things you couldn't explain? Healed too fast? Known who was calling before the phone rang?" Lorelei opened her mouth to deny it, but memories flashed. The time she fell off her bike and the scrape vanished in an hour. The way stray cats followed her. The dreams of fire and roses. "Aye," she trailed off. Suddenly, the glass window shattered inward. A figure in tactical gear swung in on a grapple line. A hunter. He didn't hesitate. He raised a crossbow, loaded with a bolt of ashwood, dipped in holy water. "Death to the leech!" the hunter screamed. Aldrich moved to intercept, snarling, his face contorting into its true, vampiric visage. He caught the bolt in midair, his hand sizzling where the holy water touched him. But the hunter wasn't alone. A second figure dropped from the ceiling vent, tossing a flashbang grenade. Bang! White light blinded Lorelei. She stumbled back, dropping the bronze horse. In the chaos, she felt a hand grab her arm. Rough, gloved. "Come with us if you want to live," the hunter yelled. But Lorelei was disoriented. She pulled away, tripping over the rug. She fell hard, her hand landing on the shattered glass of the window. A deep gash opened on her palm. Bright red blood welled up. The scent hit the room instantly. Usually the scent of human blood made vampires frenzied with hunger. But this was different. Aldrich, who had been about to tear the hunter's head off, stopped mid-motion. He gagged. He covered his nose and mouth, his eyes watering. The hunter, who was human, paused, confused. What the hell? The blood didn't smell like iron. It smelled like burning sage and concentrated UV light. Vanessa, rushing into the room at the sound of the explosion, screamed as the scent hit her. "It burns! It burns!" She clawed at her throat. Lorelei looked at her bleeding hand. The blood wasn't just red, it was glowing with a faint, golden luminescence. Aldrich fell to his knees, his skin smoking slightly where the scent touched him. "Sunlight," he wheezed. "Her blood is... sunlight." The hunter looked at Lorelei, eyes wide. "The Daybringer," he whispered in horror. "The prophecy." Instead of rescuing her, the hunter raised his gun, aiming directly at Lorelei's head. "You shouldn't exist." Lorelei froze. She was going to die. But Aldrich, skin blistering from the proximity to her open wound, lunged. He threw himself in front of Lorelei, taking the bullet meant for her. It slammed into his shoulder, exploding with silver nitrate. He roared, collapsing on top of her. "Get out!" Aldrich snarled at the hunters, his eyes glowing red. He swept his arm out, telekinetically blasting the hunters back out the broken window and into the stormy night. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the wind and rain. Lorelei lay on the floor, the vampire king heavy on top of her. His black blood mixed with her glowing gold blood on the carpet. Where they touched, steam rose, hissing. Aldrich looked down at her. Pain etched on his face. He should be healing, but the silver and her proximity were weakening him. "Why?" Lorelei whispered, staring up at the monster who had saved her. Aldrich grit his teeth, his fangs fully extended, inches from her neck. But he didn't bite. He couldn't. "Because," Aldrich rasped, "if you die, I will never know why I recognize your heartbeat." Lorelei reaches up to push him off, and her glowing blood smears on his cheek. Instantly, the wound from the silver bullet on his shoulder heals. Her blood is poison to them in the air, but a cure upon contact. She is both their destruction and their salvation. The penthouse fell into a suffocating stillness, interrupted only by a violent sizzling on the floor. There, amidst the shattered glass, their blood met, his, an abyss of ancient black, hers, a defiant, molten gold. Lorelei scrambled back, her breath hitching in her throat. She looked from her glowing palm to Aldrich Waden. The king of the Eastern Coven lay sprawled on the floor, his shirt torn, the skin of his shoulder knitting together with impossible speed. The silver nitrate burn, which should have left him incapacitated for days, was gone. In its place was new skin, pale and unblemished, save for a faint, shimmering residue of her blood. Aldrich pushed himself up, his movements fluid but weary. He stared at his shoulder, then at Lorelei, his expression a chaotic mix of hunger, reverence, and profound confusion. "You," he breathed, the word heavy with accusation and wonder. "You are a paradox." I healed you," Lorelei stammered, clutching her bleeding hand to her chest. The glow was fading, returning to a dull, mortal red. But the room still smelled of ozone and summer storms. "Why did I heal you? You kidnapped me." "And I took a bullet for you," Aldrich countered, standing up. He winced, steadying himself against a marble pillar. "Consider the debt paid." "Debt?" Lorelei laughed, a frantic, hysterical sound. "You think this is a transaction? My blood is glowing, Aldrich. Hunters just blew out your window. I'm a waitress who barely made rent last week. And now I'm... what? A battery? A weapon?" "You are the sun," Augustus Dornmere said, his cane tapping rhythmically as he stepped over the shattered glass of the balcony door. The old vampire looked rattled, his milky eyes wide. "And that makes you the most dangerous thing in our world, child. To ingest your blood is death for our kind. It is liquid ultraviolet. But to touch it, it seems it is life itself." Vanessa Whitford stood in the doorway, her beautiful face twisted into a mask of pure venom. She held a handkerchief to her nose, keeping her distance from Lorelei. She is an abomination. We should kill her now, while she is confused. If the High Council finds out we are harboring a Daybringer, they will sanction the entire Eastern Coven. We will be dust, Aldrich. Aldrich turned on her, his eyes flashing crimson. If she dies, the line of Everthorn dies. And if the prophecy Augustus speaks of is true, her death triggers the end of the Veil. Do you want the humans to see us, Vanessa? Truly see us? Vanessa faltered, lowering her eyes. No, my liege. Then she stays, Aldrich commanded. He turned back to Lorelei, extending a hand. Come, we must bind that wound before the scent draws every starving fledgling in the city. Lorelei looked at his hand, pale, deadly, yet the only thing offering stability in a world gone mad. She hesitated, then took it. His skin was cool, but where her palm touched his, a faint warmth bloomed, like a heartbeat shared between two species that should never touch. He led her not to a dungeon, but to a bathroom that rivaled a spa. He sat her on the edge of the oversized tub and retrieved a first aid kit. As he cleaned her hand, his movements were surprisingly gentle. The monster who had insulted her at the restaurant, who had called her dust, was now tending to her with the focus of a surgeon. Why the restaurant? Lorelei asked softly, watching him wrap the gauze. Why were you so cruel? Aldrich didn't look up. Cruelty is a currency, Lorelei. If I show weakness, if I show mercy to a clumsy human, my enemies see an opening. I have held this city for 3 centuries because I am feared, not because I am loved. That sounds lonely, she said. Aldrich paused, his thumb brushing the bandage. He looked up, and for a second, the mask slipped. It is not loneliness, it is solitude. There is a difference. Is there? He finished the knot and stood, his demeanor hardening again. You will need to rest. Tomorrow is the solstice ball at the Grand Asylum. Every major coven leader will be there. Lorelei's eyes widened. You're not taking me there. I have to, Aldrich said, his voice grim. The hunters know you are here. If I hide you, they will think I am weak or hoarding a weapon. I must parade you in front of them. I must show them that you are nothing more than a new pet, a curiosity. If they think you are harmless, they will hesitate to strike. And if they figure out what I am, Aldrich walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. Then, my dear, we shall see if you can freeze a room full of monsters as effectively as you froze me. As Aldrich leaves, Lorelei unrolls the bandage slightly to check the cut. The wound is already gone. In its place is a thin, silver line of scar tissue that forms a perfect, microscopic map of the city streets of Valerian. The Grand Asylum was not an asylum, and it certainly wasn't grand in the traditional sense. It was a brutalist cathedral of concrete and iron, repurposed into a sanctuary for the undead elite. Tonight, however, it was draped in velvet and lit by thousands of floating candles, their wax dripping onto the cold stone floors. Lorelei felt like an imposter in her own skin. Aldrich had provided a dress, a gown of midnight blue silk that clung to her frame like a second skin, backless and daring. Around her neck hung a choker of obsidian and diamonds, heavy enough to bruise. It was beautiful, but it felt like a collar. Head up, Aldrich murmured, as they ascended the stone steps. He wore a tuxedo of crushed velvet, looking every bit the Dark Prince. Do not look at the floor. Look through them. You are with me. I feel like I'm walking into a lion's den wearing a steak necklace, Lorelei whispered, clutching his arm tighter than she intended. Lions are noble beasts, Aldrich corrected dryly. These are vultures in couture. Smile. They entered the ballroom. The sensory assault was immediate. The music was a string quartet playing something dissonant and haunting. The smell was a heady mix of expensive perfume, stale dust, and the underlying metallic tang of blood. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. Lorelei felt the weight of their stares. These weren't human gazes. They were predatory, assessing her caloric value, her fear response, her utility. "Aldrich," a silky voice purred. A tall, waif-like vampire with hair like spun silver glided toward them, Lord Malachor of the Southern Coven. He held a glass of red liquid that was definitely not wine. "Malachor," Aldrich nodded, his body tensing imperceptibly against Lorelei's side. "And who is this morsel?" Malachor asked, stepping too close to Lorelei. He sniffed the air near her neck. Lorelei suppressed a shudder. "She smells electrical. Spicy." "She is my guest," Aldrich said, his voice a low, warning growl. "Touch her, and I will mount your head on the spire." Malachor laughed, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "Touchy, touchy. I heard rumors, Aldrich. Rumors of a hunter attack on your penthouse. And now you bring a human to the solstice? Desperate times?" "She is not just a human," Aldrich said smoothly, pulling Lorelei closer. "She is a sommelier of rare talent. I am cultivating her palate." "Is that so?" Malachor's eyes bored into Lorelei's. "Tell me, my dear, what notes do you detect in the air tonight?" Lorelei swallowed. She remembered the power she had felt in the restaurant. She channeled a fraction of that defiance now. "Rot," she said clearly, "underneath the lavender and the blood. It smells like something old is rotting." The circle of vampires nearby went silent. Malachor's smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "Charming," he spat. "Dance with me," Aldrich commanded, sweeping Lorelei onto the floor before Malachor could respond. They moved into the throng of dancers. Aldrich was a masterful dancer, leading her with firm, precise movements. Lorelei stumbled at first, but his grip kept her upright. "You provoked him," Aldrich whispered in her ear. "That was dangerous." "You told me to look through them," Lorelei shot back. "I just told him the truth." "The truth gets you killed here." As they spun, the room blurred into streaks of candlelight and shadow. For a moment, Lorelei forgot the danger. She focused on Aldrich, the line of his jaw, the surprising warmth of his hand on her waist, the way he looked at her not with hunger, but with a fierce protectiveness. "Why did you save me?" she asked again. "Really?" Aldrich spun her out and pulled her back in, his chest colliding with hers. "Because for 300 years I have felt nothing but the cold. When you spoke Sabine's name, I felt fear. It was the first time I felt alive since I stopped breathing." Lorelei looked up at him, searching his sapphire eyes. "I'm not her, Aldrich. I'm not Sabine." "I know," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "Sabine wanted to rule the world. You just want to survive it. That makes you infinitely more interesting." The music swelled to a crescendo. Aldrich dipped her, and as her head tilted back, she saw the balcony above them. There, standing in the shadows, was Vanessa. She wasn't watching the dance. She was speaking to a hooded figure, a hunter. She handed him something small and silver, a key. Lorelei gasped as Aldrich pulled her upright. "Aldrich, the balcony!" Before she could finish, the lights in the asylum went out. Panic erupted. Screams tore through the darkness. The smell of fear spiked. "Stay close to me," Aldrich roared, his hand clamping onto her wrist. But in the pitch black, a cold hand grabbed Lorelei's other arm. It wasn't Aldrich. The fingers were skeletal, icy. "Sabine's debt must be paid," Malachor's voice whispered in her ear, right before he shoved something sharp into her side. "Lorelei doesn't bleed. The object Malachor stabs her with, an ancient bone dagger, shatters against her skin as if she were made of diamond. The impact sends a shockwave of golden light pulsing through the room, momentarily illuminating the darkness and revealing that every single mirror in the ballroom has cracked in the exact same pattern. The constellation of the Pleiades. The blast of light threw everyone back. Malachor shrieked, clutching his hand, which was charred black. Aldrich wasted no time. He scooped Lorelei up in his arms and blurred, moving with supernatural speed through the chaotic crowd, smashing through the heavy oak doors and into the rainy night. He didn't stop running until they reached the safety of a safe house, an abandoned underground metro station that Aldrich had converted into a bunker. He set her down on a leather sofa in the center of the tiled room. "Let me see," he demanded, tearing the silk of her dress at the waist to check the wound. There was no wound, only unbroken, glowing skin. Aldrich slumped back, sitting on the dusty floor, his tuxedo ruined. He looked at her, his chest heaving, a habit, not a necessity. Diamond skin, sunlight blood, telekinetic voice. "What are you?" Lorelei was shaking, adrenaline crashing. "I don't know. I just wanted to be a chef. I don't want to be a diamond." She started to cry, the stress finally breaking her. Aldrich hesitated. Then, awkwardly, he reached out and took her hand. "Lorelei, look at me." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I lied to you," Aldrich said quietly. "About Sabine." Lorelei wiped her eyes. "What?" "I didn't just kill her," Aldrich confessed, his voice rough. "I was her familiar. Before I was a king, before I was even a vampire, I was human. I was her protector. We were close." Lorelei stared at him. "You loved her." "I worshipped her," Aldrich corrected. "But she went mad. The power of the Seven Sisters, the magic she wielded, it consumed her. She wanted to blot out the sun permanently, to create a world of eternal night where she could rule as a god. I had to stop her. To save humanity, I let a vampire turn me so I would have the strength to kill her." He looked at his hands. "I saved the world, and I damned myself. And when she died, she cursed me. She said her blood would return in a vessel that was pure of heart and strong of will to judge me, to decide if I was worthy of forgiveness or if I should burn." Lorelei pulled her hand back slowly. "So that's what I am. A judge? And you're keeping me close so I don't sentence you to death?" "At first, yes," Aldrich admitted. "But tonight, at the ball, when I saw Malachor touch you, I didn't care about the judgment. I just wanted to rip his throat out for daring to look at you." The air in the station shifted. The tension wasn't fear anymore. It was something magnetic. Lorelei looked at this ancient, powerful creature who was kneeling on a dirty subway floor, confessing his sins to a waitress. "I saw Vanessa," Lorelei said suddenly, the memory surfacing. "On the balcony. She was talking to a hunter. She gave him a key." Aldrich went still. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Vanessa gave a key to a hunter?" "Yes, before the lights went out." Aldrich stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. "The penthouse, the wards. She gave them the key to the spire." "But we're not there," Lorelei said. "No," Aldrich said, realizing the horror of the situation. "But Augustus is, and the grimoire of the Eastern Coven, the list of every vampire in my protection, is in the library. If the hunters get that list, it's a massacre," Aldrich finished. "Vanessa isn't just betraying me. She's burning the kingdom down to rule over the ashes." He turned to Lorelei. "Stay here. The wards on this place are old. They will hold." "No," Lorelei stood up, the blue dress tattered, her eyes fierce. "I'm coming with you." "Lorelei, it is suicide." "You said my blood is the sun," Lorelei said, walking past him to the weapons rack on the wall. She picked up a heavy iron flashlight, wielding it like a mace. "And you said you needed a partner, not a pet. Let's go save your kingdom, Your Majesty." Aldrich looked at her, and a slow, terrifying grin spread across his face. It was the smile of a king who had finally found his queen. As they leave the station, the digital billboard on the abandoned platform flickers to life. It's not an advertisement. It's a live feed from inside the spire. Augustus is tied to a chair, and Vanessa is standing behind him. But she isn't holding a knife. She's holding a phone, and on the screen, Lorelei sees a photo of herself from yesterday at the restaurant. But in the background of the photo, standing in the shadows of the kitchen, is a woman who looks exactly like Lorelei, watching her. The spire was burning. It wasn't a fire of heat and combustion, but a cold, chemical conflagration of holy phosphorescence. The hunters had deployed military-grade UV flares in the atrium, turning the glass needle of the building into a lighthouse of blinding, lethal violet. To a human, it looked like a disco gone wrong. To a vampire, it was a vertical kill box, a pillar of concentrated dawn that would strip flesh from bone in seconds. Aldrich Whedon and Lorelei Crestmore stood across the rain-slicked avenue, sheltering in the doorway of a boarded-up antique shop. The rain hammered against the pavement, but it did little to dampen the heat radiating from Lorelei's skin or the cold fury emanating from Aldrich. Aldrich stared up at his kingdom, his legacy of 300 years, now turning into a beacon of his destruction. His face, usually a mask of bored arrogance, was cracked with genuine grief. "There are 30 floors between the lobby and the penthouse," Aldrich said, his voice devoid of emotion, though his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "The elevators will be lockdown sealed by the hunters' tech. The ventilation shafts are likely pumped with aerosolized garlic and silver dust. We take the stairs. It will be a slaughter." Lorelei gripped the heavy iron flashlight she had taken from the metro station. It felt ridiculously inadequate against an army of tech-savvy zealots, but her skin still hummed with a low-frequency vibration, the memory of the diamond armor she had manifested earlier. She looked at her hands. They looked normal now, calloused and stained with grime, but she could feel the power coiling beneath the dermis, waiting. "You clear the path," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. She looked at the Vampire King. "I'll watch your back. We go together, or we don't go at all." Aldrich turned to her. For a moment, the ancient predator softened. He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "Together," he agreed. They moved. They crossed the street in a sprint, dodging the erratic sweep of the hunter searchlights. Aldrich kicked the service door in with a force that buckled the steel frame. The lobby was a chaotic strobe of gunfire and screaming shadows. The air tasted of ozone and burning ozone. Dozens of hunters in tactical gear were setting up heavy repeaters, their visors glowing green. Aldrich became a blur of violence. He didn't just fight, he dismantled. He moved like a dark wind, snapping necks and deflecting bullets with vambraces made of hardened shadow. He was a creature of the old world, tearing through modern technology. But the hunters were prepared. "Target Alpha! Deploy the nets!" a squad leader screamed. Weighted nets, woven with filaments of pure silver, shot from compressed air cannons. Aldrich dodged two, but a third clipped his leg, the silver sizzling against his trousers. He roared, stumbling. "Aldrich!" Lorelei screamed. She didn't think, she just reacted. She saw a hunter pull the pin on a spherical grenade. Not explosive, but a silver dust dispersal unit. He rolled it toward Aldrich, who was momentarily pinned. Lorelei threw herself onto the grenade. Aldrich turned, his eyes wide with absolute horror. "No!" Boom! The sound was muffled, heavy and dull, but Lorelei didn't explode. As the grenade detonated beneath her, time seemed to liquefy. Her skin didn't tear. Instead, it instantly transmuted into that translucent, diamond-hard substance, refracting the light in the lobby into 1,000 rainbows. The explosion was contained entirely beneath her body, the shockwave rippling through her crystalline form like a bell being struck, but leaving her unharmed. She stood up, her clothes shredded, revealing the terrifying beauty of her diamond form. She was glowing with absorbed kinetic energy, a living battery charged to capacity. She opened her mouth and screamed. It wasn't a human sound, it was a sonic pulse of pure energy, a frequency that shattered the glass of the UV lights, cracked the visors of the hunters' helmets, and knocked every human in the lobby unconscious with the sheer pressure change. Silence fell, heavy and ringing. Aldrich stared at her, the enemies around him forgotten. He looked at the woman who had once served him wine, now standing amidst the wreckage like a deity of retribution. "You just ate an explosion," he whispered, disbelief warring with awe. "I told you," Lorelei panted, the diamond skin fading back to flesh, leaving her exhausted and leaning against a pillar. "I'm not a pet." They fought their way up. The stairwell was a grueling gauntlet. Floor by floor, the resistance grew thinner, but the air grew colder, heavier with a psychic weight that pressed against their temples. By the time they reached the 40th floor, the silence was absolute. No hunters, no guards, just a creeping dread that smelled of old, dried flowers and decay. They burst into the penthouse. The room was destroyed. The priceless art was slashed, the furniture overturned. In the center of the room, amidst the ruin, Augustus Dornmere sat tied to a high-backed chair, his head bowed. "Augustus!" Aldrich rushed forward, relief flooding his face. "Wait!" Lorelei warned, grabbing his arm. She sensed a shift in the air pressure, a static charge that made her teeth ache. "It's too easy. The wards, they aren't broken. They're inverted." Augustus lifted his head, his milky, blind eyes, the eyes that had seen centuries of history, were gone. In their place were eyes of swirling, chaotic violet, burning with a malicious intelligence that didn't belong to the old advisor. "Augustus is gone, little king." The old vampire's voice was distorted, layered with a woman's cadence, sounding like two voices speaking in dissonance. He was fragile. He broke so easily when I whispered the truth to him. Augustus's body began to contort. Bones snapped with the sound of dry branches breaking. The skin sloughed off like wet paper, dissolving into grey ash. From within the ruin of the old vampire, a figure emerged. It wasn't Vanessa. It was the woman from the photo. It was Lorelei. But this version of her was terrifying. Her skin was grey, her veins black maps of necrotic energy, and she wore a crown of twisted thorns fused into her skull. The creature isn't a shapeshifter, as Dark Lorelei steps out of the corpse of Augustus. The real Lorelei feels a sharp, physical tug in her chest, as if a hook has been embedded in her heart. She realizes with sickening clarity that she isn't the original. The monster in front of her is the real Sabine Everthorn, and Lorelei is just a container, a magical construct created to purify Sabine's blood over 3 centuries so she could inhabit it again. "Hello, spare parts," Sabine purred, circling them. She moved with a glitchy, unnatural speed, leaving afterimages in the air. "You've kept my power warm very nicely. I must say, the design has improved since the prototype." Aldrich stood between them, his fangs fully extended, his claws lengthening. "Sabine, I killed you. I watched you burn." "You killed my body," Sabine corrected, glancing at the corner where Vanessa huddled, rocking back and forth, her mind completely shattered by the psychic presence of the witch. "But a witch of the Seven Sisters does not die so easily. I hid my soul in the ley lines of the city, woven into the electricity, the internet, the very noise of humanity. I built a vessel, this girl, and filled her with my bloodline, diluted and purified generation after generation, until it was strong enough to hold me again." She looked at Lorelei with hungry, covetous eyes. "You are not a person, Lorelei. You are a suit, a biological storage unit, and it's time to get dressed." "I am real," Lorelei yelled, though her voice shook. "I have memories. I have a life. I remember my mother, the smell of her baking bread. I remember scraping my knee in 3rd grade. Implants," Sabine dismissed with a cruel wave of her hand. "Fabrications written into your cortex to keep the mind stable while the body matured. Without a personality matrix, the vessel degrades. Your mother? A construct. Your childhood. A script. The only real thing about you is the blood in your veins, and that belongs to me." Sabine raised a hand. Lorelei flew across the room, pinned against the far wall by invisible forces that felt like crushing bands of iron. "No!" Aldrich lunged at Sabine, moving faster than sound, but Sabine was faster. She caught him by the throat with one hand, lifting the Vampire King effortlessly into the air. "Oh, Aldrich, my sweet, treacherous pet. You think you can fight your creator? I wrote the spell that turned you. I know every weakness in your code." She began to squeeze. Smoke rose from Aldrich's skin. She wasn't just choking him. She was burning him with pure magic, unraveling the necromancy that kept him alive. Lorelei struggled against the invisible wall. She watched Aldrich dying. She watched the man who had moved from a monster to a protector. The man who had confessed his sins to her on a dirty subway floor. She looked at Sabine, this ancient, hateful thing that claimed to own her. "You are a suit," Sabine had said. "You are nothing." Lorelei closed her eyes. She searched her mind. She looked past the memories of the mother who might not have existed, past the childhood that might have been a lie. She went deeper, into the core of her being, and there she found it. Not a script, not a program, but a golden wall. The same wall that had blocked Aldrich's glamour. It wasn't something Sabine had put there. It was something Lorelei had built. It was her will, her defiance. "No," Lorelei thought. "I am not a suit. I am the sun." She stopped fighting the external force. Instead, she turned inward. She pushed against that golden wall. Not out, but in. She broke the dam of her own power, flooding her system with the raw, chaotic energy of the Pleiades. Lorelei opened her eyes. They weren't brown anymore. They were blinding white, devoid of pupils or irises. "Put him down." The command didn't just vibrate the air, it unmade it. The physics of the room inverted. Gravity reversed. The overturned furniture floated up toward the ceiling. The rain outside stopped falling and hung suspended in the air. Sabine dropped Aldrich, stumbling back. She looked at Lorelei with genuine shock. You shouldn't have access to the core yet. I keyed it to my frequency." "I'm not accessing it," Lorelei said, her voice a chorus of 1,000 voices, harmonizing in terrible power. "I am rewriting it." Lorelei pushed off the wall, floating mid-air, her hair streaming upward as if she were underwater. She didn't attack Sabine with force. She attacked her with truth. She projected every memory she had. The taste of cheap coffee, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the struggle to pay rent, the fear of the dark, the hope of a better day, directly into Sabine's mind. "These are lies," Sabine shrieked, clutching her head, blood streaming from her nose. "Stop! These human trivialities, they burn." "They are life," Lorelei roared. "And life is messy. It hurts, and it is mine." Sabine, desperate and losing ground, tries to counterattack by summoning the blood from Aldrich's veins, intending to boil him from the inside out. She chants the blood-binding spell, but Aldrich's blood doesn't obey her. Because Lorelei healed him in Chapter 4, his blood is now fused with hers. He is immune to Sabine's blood magic. He stands up, draws his own blood with a claw, and flings it at Sabine. It acts like concentrated acid, melting her magical form upon contact. Sabine fell back, screaming as Aldrich's blood sizzled against her grey skin, burning holes through her magical projection. She looked diminished, flickering like a dying bulb in a storm. "I will not go back to the dark," Sabine screamed, her voice tearing the fabric of reality. "If I cannot have this body, I will collapse the spire on all of us. I will bring this whole city down into the abyss with me." She slammed her hands onto the floor. Black cracks raced through the concrete, glowing with necrotic light. The building groaned, a terrifying metallic shriek as steel beams bent and rivets popped. The glass walls shattered outward, letting the storm rage inside. The wind howled, whipping the curtains and debris into a vortex. "She's destabilizing the foundation!" Aldrich yelled over the wind, grabbing a pillar to steady himself as the floor tilted 15 degrees. "Lorelei, you have to kill her! Blast her!" "I can't!" Lorelei yelled back, glowing brighter, trying to hold the building together with her telekinesis. "She's linked to me. If I kill her, I destroy myself. Our life forces are entangled. Then sever the link." "I don't know how," Lorelei cried, tears streaming down her face, evaporating instantly against her glowing skin. The floor tilted further. They were sliding toward the open edge, a 1,000-foot drop into the city below. The spire was seconds away from structural failure. Aldrich looked at Lorelei. He looked at the chaos, the destruction, and then at the woman who shone like a star in the middle of his darkness. He saw her struggle, saw her willingness to die to save a city that didn't know she existed. "Then I will do it," Aldrich said softly. He let go of the pillar. He didn't run at Sabine. He ran at Lorelei. He grabbed her face in his hands. The contact burned him, blistering his skin, but he didn't let go. He forced her to look at him. "What are you doing?" Lorelei cried, her concentration wavering. "The curse," Aldrich said, his eyes filled with tears of blood. "Sabina said her blood would return to judge me. You are the judge, Lorelei. You always were. Pass the sentence." "What? I can't—" "Forgive me," Aldrich whispered, his forehead resting against hers, ignoring the searing heat. "Forgive me for the monster I was. Forgive me for creating this world of fear. Forgive me for leaving you alone in the dark." Lorelei looked at him, seeing past the vampire, past the king, to the man who had been trapped for 300 years. "I forgave you a long time ago, you idiot." Aldrich smiled, a genuine heart-breaking smile. "Then the cycle is broken." He kissed her. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was a metaphysical seal. He didn't drink from her. He poured into her. He reversed the polarity of the vampire bite. He pushed his own immortality, his centuries of life force, the dark magic that sustained him, into her glowing core. "Take it," he commanded mentally. "Burn it away." The surge of energy overloaded Lorelei. She screamed as the dark energy met her light. The collision was cataclysmic. The link to Sabine snapped with the sound of a cracking whip. Sabine screamed as her anchor to the world was cut. "No, I am eternal." "You are dust," Lorelei shouted. Without Lorelei as a tether, the singularity Sabine created consumed her. She imploded, vanishing into a pinprick of nothingness, taking the storm and the darkness with her. The wind stopped. The building groaned one last time, and stabilized. Lorelei fell to the floor, the glow fading from her skin. She was gasping, alive, human. She looked for Aldrich. He was lying near the edge of the balcony, face up to the stormy sky. He looked old. The immortality he had given her had aged him rapidly. His hair was grey, his skin lined with deep wrinkles, his hands trembling. Lorelei crawled to him, sobbing, ignoring the pain in her own body. "Aldrich! No, take it back! You can't do this!" Aldrich opened his eyes. They were no longer sapphire shards of ice. They were a soft, warm blue. Human eyes. "I can feel the cold," he whispered, shivering, his voice raspy and weak. "It's nice. It feels real." "You're dying," Lorelei wept, clutching his hand. "No," Aldrich rasped, reaching up to touch her face with a trembling hand. "I'm finally waking up," Lorelei cries, her tears falling onto his face. But they don't heal him this time. The magic is gone. However, as the storm clouds break and the sun begins to rise over Valerian City, the first ray of true dawn hits Aldrich. He doesn't burn. He bathes in it. He closes his eyes and breathes in the light. He has become fully human. The Midnight Orchid reopened months later. The grime was gone from the cobblestones, scrubbed clean by a city that felt lighter, as if a heavy shroud had been lifted. The fear that used to choke the district had dissipated, replaced by a cautious optimism. The vampires were still there, but the hierarchy had shifted. The old cruelty was gone, replaced by a tentative treaty. Inside the restaurant, the jazz band played a lively tune, something hopeful, with a saxophone solo that soared. The tables were full. Lorelei Crestmore walked through the dining room. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She owned the place. She wore a simple, elegant dress, but on her finger was a ring of black iron and diamond, a reminder of the pact between shadow and light. She walked to table 1, the prime spot by the window. An older man sat there, reading a newspaper with reading glasses perched on his nose. He had silver hair and deep laugh lines around his eyes. He looked up as she approached, smiling a smile that wasn't terrifying, but kind. A smile that knew the value of every second. "Your usual, Mr. Whedon?" Lorelei asked, holding a bottle of 1945 Chateau Mouton. "Please," Aldrich said, folding his newspaper. "And Lorelei?" "Yes." "No ice." He winked, reaching out to cover her hand with his warm one. "I've had enough of the cold." She poured the wine, the rich red liquid swirling in the glass. He took a sip, closing his eyes, savoring it not as a king savoring blood, but as a man savoring a moment. Outside, the sun was shining, and for the first time in 300 years, Aldrich Whedon didn't look away. Did this story freeze your heart or melt it? If you enjoyed Lorelei and Aldrich's epic journey from darkness to dawn, please like this story, share it with your fellow night owls, and subscribe for more tales of forbidden romance and supernatural twists. Let me know in the comments, would you have chosen immortality or humanity?